theater and English, and a master in education in reading, writing, and literacy from the University of Pennsylvania. She's also a 2016 graduate of the Rosemont College MFA program. From 2004 until 2008, Molly was an editor at Marvel Comics, where she worked on comic books such as Fantastic Four, Captain America, and New Avengers. Her short stories have been featured in numerous literary magazines. Molly lives outside Philadelphia with her husband and twin sons. Owl Eyes, her first novel, is forthcoming in spring 2018 from Fire and Ice YA. Please welcome Molly.
I'm going to read from my novel, Owl Eyes, which will be coming out on March 20th.
Yay!
And I'll be reading the second half of the first chapter. So what you need to know going in is that the main character, Nora, is a servant in the kitchen house in province, in the main estate province called the Ruins. She lives with her adoptive parents, Peter and Greta, and immediately prior to this section I'm about to read to you, she found out from the daughters of the lord of the estate that her father, biological father, lives just right across the field in the main house. And so using process of elimination, she's determined that that means her father must be the head servant, whose name is Robert. And the only other thing you need to know is that when Lady Portia shows up, she's the lady of the estate. Good morning, early riser. Any chance you made breakfast while we were sleeping? Peter said, as he climbed the ladder down from the loft and joined me in the kitchen, where I'd been trying to quiet the pounding of my heart since before sunup. He put his arm around me and kissed my forehead. The bristles of his short beard tickled my chin. All fathers should feel like this, I thought. I had to keep myself from trailing behind him when he brought breakfast to the main house. I would have to wait until everyone was doing their work before I could go inside. I'd seen Greta and Peter go in the back door of the main house as often as I'd seen Robert, Sarah, or one of the other servants come out of it on their way across the field. The servants' quarters were supposed to be right near the entrance. There had to be something there that would tell me about Robert. I picked at my breakfast. The nervous flutter in my stomach made me too nauseated to eat. I'd occasionally thought about my real parents resting in the world apart. Their ashes would have been given to the wind somewhere meaningful. Someone would have held me nearby to ensure that their spirits would watch over me. Growing up, though, I had the parents I needed. Greta and Peter gave me a fire burning in the hearth, a garden to pick food from, and stories to fill warm nights in the loft. But now, with just a few words from Siobhan and Annabelle, I needed more. No one would be in the main house servants' quarters after breakfast. I waited until Peter went outside to repair the fence around the chicken coop, and Greta began making her daily bread at the counter that faced away from the window. I'm gonna go see if any more tomatoes are ripe, I said, as Greta took out caraway seeds and flour and put them next to the eggs that I gathered from the coop before breakfast. She nodded, and I headed out, glancing back to make sure that she had started on the dough. While she was busy measuring ingredients, I ran across the field to the main house and went in the back entrance. Once inside, I cracked open the first door I came to. The room I entered was about the size of the floor of the kitchen house, large enough to fit 6 beds. Some belongings, probably Victor's, since Peter always complained what a mess Victor was when he came back from bringing in supper, were strewn about the floor, while others sat on shelves or against the wall. The largest bed would belong to Matthew and Sarah. That left only a few beds that could be Robert's. A green satin vest with gold edging hung on a stand across the room. That had to be his. He would wear it to serve at Sir Alcander and Lady Portia's banquets. Robert's shelves were bare, except for a few books and a tin of my bilberry biscuits. I warmed at the thought that my father had a stash of my cooking. There was something else on the shelf, something flat enough that I couldn't see what it was. I stood on my tiptoes and retrieved a palm-sized agate cameo. The carving was of a young woman not more than 20 years old. She was lovely, with long, wavy hair tied back with a large bow. Was this my mother? In profile, it was difficult to make out anything specific about her features. I wished her image were in color so I could see if she had my gold eyes. I had to talk to Robert before I lost my nerve. I went back to the hallway with the cameo clutched in my fist. I didn't know where to go, but I did know that I would be in trouble if I were caught roaming the halls. I picked a direction, glancing around each corner before proceeding as I looked for a shock of steely gray hair. Portraits lined the hallway. All of the subjects wore the same shade of dark green that marked them as the noble family of the rooms. I stopped in front of a painting that depicted Sir Alcander and Lady Portia posing with younger versions of Siobhan and Annabel. The artist captured the girls' smug expressions well. The paint in Siobhan's eyes shined with mischief. Lady Portia's every hair was defined. The painter had arranged his light source to highlight her sharp, elegant cheekbones. Sir Alcander's eyes were duller than those of Lady Portia or their daughters. Even Annabel's eyes twinkled with specks of white that were missing in her father's. Nora? I wheeled around to face Sarah, the head maid. What are you doing here? I looked at the floor. The gray and green grain of the marble flowed like the lines on one of Sir Alcander's maps. I ran the tip of my shoe along one of the paths. I'm looking for Robert, I said. I need to talk to him. It's important. He's taking dictation for Sir Alcander. Sarah looked past me down the hall. He'll be done soon. Come with me. She put a hand on my back and ushered me in the direction from which I'd come. You're not supposed to be in here, she said. I know. I tucked the cameo in my pocket. But it's important. Don't tell Greta, please. Sarah glanced behind us. The pressure of her hand on my back became more urgent. It's not Greta I'm worried about. She opened the door to the servants' quarters and pushed me inside. Stay here. I'll get Robert. She left the door open a crack and hurried down the hall. I sat on Robert's bed. A long piece of straw poked out of the mattress. I pulled it out from the fabric and broke a piece off the end. By the time Robert arrived, shutting the door behind him, there was a small pile of straw on my lap. I leapt off the bed, spilling it onto the floor. Sorry. I bent down to sweep the straw into my hand. Robert knelt to help me. Nora, what are you doing here? You're not supposed to be. I need to talk to you, I said. It's about my. The words stuck on my tongue. Siobhan and Annabelle said that. I took the cameo out of my pocket. Who is this? Robert snatched it out of my hand. What are you doing with this? My cheeks burned. I found it on the shelf. Is it your wife? The angry lines on Robert's face softened. No, it's my sister. She died a long time ago. Why do you ask? I sat on the bed. I felt heavy enough that I might sink into the straw and never come out. Siobhan and Annabelle said they heard Lady Portia and Sir Alcander talking, and they said that I choked out the word, father was in the main house. I thought you might be. Robert moved away, dropping the straw into a bucket next to the bed. I sank further into the mattress. Being poked with spindles of straw was preferable to the silence in the room. Your father? Robert said. Nora, the man who was your father is long gone. But you have to be, I protested. Your hair, it's just like mine. What, this old mess? Robert ran a hand through his hair and sat down next to me. My voice dropped to a whisper. It has to be you. I'm sorry, Nora. I don't have any children. Peter's been a good father to you, hasn't he? Yes. I could feel each razor of straw jabbing into my skin. I just thought... Wait, what did he say? You know who my father was. It came up out as a statement, not a question. Robert jumped up from the bed. No, Nora, you misunderstood. You do, yes. I leapt up after him. You said he was gone, but you know who he was. Tell me. Robert's eyes darted back and forth as if he were looking for a way to escape the conversation before fixing on a point behind me. Panic tinged his voice. She was just bringing in a message from the kitchen house. I turned to see Lady Portia standing on the other side of the door. I hadn't heard it open. Waves of anger passed through her cold ocean eyes. I had only ever seen Lady Portia angry, but this was different. This was rage, and it was aimed squarely at me. Robert put a protective arm around my shoulders. I'm sending her back right now. Eleanor. Lady Portia's voice was ice cracking. You are not permitted in here. I'm sorry, I croaked. I'll go back. This was different from Sarah's confusion at finding me in the hall or Robert's initial anger at discovering his cameo in my hands. Different and infinitely more dangerous. Before I could move, Lady Portia was in the room, grabbing my arm and wrenching me from Robert's grasp. I could feel her breath on my cheeks as she pulled me close. You are supposed to stay in the kitchen house, she hissed. She jerked me out of the room and down the hall. Ma'am, Robert started after us. Stay where you are, Lady Portia said, without turning to look at him. This is none of your business. I looked back, panicked, as I flailed in my attempt to keep up with Lady Portia's long stride. I heard the sound of the back door being thrown open. I could only hope Robert was going to get Greta or Peter. Lady Portia's fingers burned on my arm as she pulled me behind her, making a series of turns through the hallways. Anytime I opened my mouth to protest, to apologize, to cry, she jerked me forward, and my words were swallowed in a yelp of pain. She finally stopped in front of a plain wooden door. It felt out of place next to the other doors in the hallway, which were lacquered and covered in carvings. Its austerity didn't belong, just like I didn't. My wrist glowed red when Lady Portia let me go, and I rubbed my arm to quell the pain. My mouth ran ahead of me, spitting out every apology I could think of. She ignored me as she sorted through the keys on a ring she took from her dress pocket and fit a large iron key into the lock. The door creaked open. I couldn't make out anything inside. There were no windows to let in the light. The darkness in the room felt different than when the kitchen house darkened after sunset. This darkness was hungry. I turned to run. Portia caught my wrist and shoved me into the room. I fell on my hands and knees. Small pieces of something, dust, ash, rose up around me, making their way into my throat. I started to cough. Never ask about your father again. She slammed the door, plunging me into the dark. The door fit so snugly in its frame that there wasn't even a sliver of light shining at the bottom. It was a moment before my shock allowed me to react. The room smelled scorched with death, like it hadn't been opened in ages. I coughed again, trying to get out the pieces of the room that had infiltrated my throat, my nostrils, my eyes. I shuffled forwards until I reached the door and felt for the knob. It was cold to the touch. I pulled as hard as I could, but it would not turn. "Robert!" I screamed. "Sarah! Peter! Greta!" I kept screaming their names until my throat was raw. The fine powder that covered the floor stuck to me wherever my body touched the damp ground. There were voices down the hall, but they were too far away for me to hear what they were saying. "Father?" I whispered. My arm ached where I could feel a bruise blooming around my wrist. I wanted Peter and Greta. I wanted my father and mother, but I didn't know their names. Only the darkness held me as I cried. Thank you.